Lorelei's bloodied fingertips left crimson streaks on the doorknob as she checked it for the 19th time that night, her father's words still burning in her ears. Stop the theatrics. Nobody has time for this drama. 15 years later, she watches from backstage as her mother's best friend tearfully introduces Lorelei's mental health podcast to their community group, completely unaware that the brave young woman in those viral posts was the same girl they once called attention-seeking. The journey between these two moments, from bleeding hands to healing words, was a path Lorelei never imagined she'd travel, let alone share with thousands of others who'd found their own pain reflected in hers. What devastating moment finally forced her family to confront the reality of her illness? If this story moved you, please share your experiences in the comments below. Like and subscribe for more stories that shine light on misunderstood struggles, and share with someone fighting an invisible battle. The first time Lorelei organized her stuffed animals by height, color, and species, her mother called her meticulous. She was 8 years old, and the warm praise made her glow with pride. By the time she arranged her colored pencils in perfect rainbow order, sharpened to identical lengths, her father nodded approvingly and said, "That's my detail-oriented girl." Neither parent noticed when organization became obligatory. Lorelei couldn't sleep unless her shoes were perfectly aligned, when she missed breakfast because she had to fold her socks just right, when she was late for school because she needed to check the stove 4 times, even though she'd never touched it. Mrs. Henderson, her third-grade teacher, was the first to notice. During parent-teacher conferences, she mentioned Lorelei's excessive hand-washing between activities. "Her hands are raw," Mrs. Henderson said gently. "I'm a bit concerned." Lorelei's mother laughed lightly. "She's just a clean child. In this day of germs everywhere, isn't that a good thing? She gets very upset if she can't wash them," the teacher pressed. "Maybe talk to your pediatrician." On the drive home, Lorelei's father dismissed the concern entirely. "Some teachers need to create problems to feel important," he said. "You're just particular, like me. Nothing wrong with high standards." The first panic attack came when Lorelei was 10. She'd forgotten to check her window lock before leaving for school. The certainty that something terrible would happen, that someone would break in, that her family would be hurt, that it would be her fault, crashed over her like a wave. She hid in the school bathroom, rocking back and forth, gasping for air, convinced she was dying. When she came home that day, she said nothing. Instead, she developed a new ritual, checking every window and door in the house 3 times each before leaving. The routine added 30 minutes to her morning, but the relief was worth it. Her parents noticed her tardiness but attributed it to Dor. They didn't see the terror in her eyes when they rushed her, didn't understand that their impatience was forcing her to choose between being late and keeping them safe. "Lorelei, for goodness sake, we're going to be late again," her mother would sigh. "What are you doing up there?" "Nothing," Lorelei would call back, her heart racing as she rushed through her checks, the panic rising when she couldn't remember if this was the second or third time she'd checked the bathroom window. In a family that prized accomplishment and appearance, discomfort was to be overcome, not acknowledged. Her father, a successful corporate attorney, and her mother, a perfectionist homemaker with a carefully curated social circle, had no framework for understanding the storm brewing inside their daughter. Perfectionism was a virtue. Anxiety was weakness, and weakness, in the Davis household, was simply not tolerated by middle school. Lorelei's world had shrunk to the size of her rituals. Each morning began with the same sequence. Check the alarm clock 3 times. Touch each corner of her bed. Count to 8 while brushing each quadrant of her teeth. Any interruption meant starting over. Any variation meant catastrophe. Birthday party invitations piled up, then dwindled. Friends stopped calling after Lorelei canceled plans too many times, unable to explain that she couldn't leave the house until she'd completed her checks. That sometimes the checks took hours, that sometimes she simply couldn't complete them at all. "Why don't you go to Melissa's sleepover?" her mother asked one Friday. "You used to be such good friends." Lorelei shrugged, not meeting her mother's eyes. How could she explain that sleepovers meant unfamiliar bathrooms, unpredictable routines, no way to ensure everyone's safety? "I just don't feel like it," she mumbled. Her father looked up from his newspaper. "Your mother and I are getting concerned about this antisocial behavior, Lorelei. It's not healthy." The irony made her want to scream. Nothing about her life felt healthy. She was exhausted, constantly, The thoughts never stopped, intrusive, horrifying images of her family dying because she'd failed at some imperceptible task. The only relief came from the rituals, but they were demanding more and more of her time, leaving less for homework, for friends, for anything resembling a normal teenage life. One evening, after spending 2 hours arranging and rearranging her textbooks, Lorelei tried to explain. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "I think something's wrong with me." Her mother looked up from her recipe book. "What do you mean, honey? I can't stop checking things, and I have these thoughts, double quotes." Lorelei's voice caught bad thoughts about terrible things happening. Her mother's face softened momentarily, then hardened with determination. "Oh, Lorelei, everyone has strange thoughts sometimes. It's called being a teenager." She returned to her recipe. "Your hormones are all over the place. It'll pass." It didn't pass, it got worse. Lorelei learned to hide it better, performing her rituals when no one was looking, making excuses for her behavior, pushing down the panic until she was alone. She became an expert at presenting a calm exterior while her mind raged with impossible demands. Her grades began to slip, not dramatically, never enough to truly concern her achievement-oriented parents, but enough that her usual perfect scores became merely above average. "You're not applying yourself," her father said over dinner, disappointment evident. "You have so much potential." Lorelei nodded, too tired to argue. She'd been up until 3 a.m., checking and rechecking her homework, erasing and rewriting until the paper thinned. It wasn't good enough. It was never good enough. But it was all she could manage while the demands in her head grew louder, more insistent, more impossible to satisfy. The bathroom gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights, every surface scrubbed to a clinical shine. Lorelei knelt on the tile floor, her knees aching after 2 hours in the same position, scouring every inch of grout between the tiles with a toothbrush. Her hands, raw and cracked inside rubber gloves, trembled slightly as she worked. Downstairs, she could hear her family getting ready for her grandmother's 70th birthday celebration. Car keys jingled. Her mother called her name for the 3rd time, voice rising with impatience. "Lorelei, we need to leave in 5 minutes." But Lorelei couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when she'd only cleaned 2/3 of the floor. Not when her mind screamed that if she stopped now, her grandmother would get sequestered. It would be her fault. Footsteps approached, quick and heavy. Her father appeared in the doorway, already wearing his coat. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "We're going to be late. Everyone's waiting." Lorelei didn't look up. "I need to finish." "Finish what?" "The bathroom is already cleaned." "It was clean an hour ago." "I can't stop yet," she whispered, her voice small. Her father's face darkened. "This is ridiculous. Get up, now. Your grandmother is expecting us." Panic clawed at Lorelei's throat. "I can't," she repeated, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, Dad, I need 10 more minutes." "No, this stops now." He stepped forward, reaching for her arm. Lorelei flinched away, dropping the toothbrush. "If I don't finish, something bad will happen to Grandma." The words hung in the air between them. Her father stared at her, bewilderment turning to anger. "That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard," he said flatly. "This isn't normal, Lorelei. This is just drama for attention." Her mother appeared behind him, concern etched on her face. "What's going on?" "She says she needs to clean the bathroom or something bad will happen to your mother," her father replied, voice dripping with disdain. More of her theatrics. "It's not theatrics," Lorelei cried, tears flowing freely now. "You don't understand. These thoughts won't stop. I have to do these things or something terrible will happen. I can't control it." Her parents exchanged a look, the same look they'd been exchanging for years, whenever Lorelei's behavior confused or frustrated them, a look that said, "What's wrong with her? Why can't she just be normal?" "Lorelei," her mother said carefully, "this isn't healthy. If you truly can't control these thoughts, then maybe we should consider getting you some help." Help, the word should have brought relief. Instead, it sounded like a threat. Her father's jaw tightened. "You have 2 choices. Either you get up, get in the car, and act like a normal teenager at your grandmother's party, or we're taking you to a therapist to fix whatever this is." Fix, like she was broken, like this was a choice. "We're not missing your grandmother's birthday because of this," her father continued. "So make your decision, now." Dr. Peter's office smelled like peppermint and old magazines. Lorelei sat stiffly on the examination table, the paper crinkling beneath her. as her mother explained the situation to the family physician they'd seen since Lorelei was a toddler. "She's been having these episodes," her mother said, carefully avoiding Lorelei's eyes, cleaning excessively, checking things repeatedly, missing events because of these rituals, and now she's connecting them to preventing bad things from happening. Dr. Peters nodded, making a brief note in Lorelei's chart. He was in his 60s, old school in his approach, with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Teenagers often develop quirky behaviors," he said, addressing her mother rather than Lorelei. "It's a time of significant stress, school pressures, social dynamics, hormonal changes." He finally turned to Lorelei. "Are you having trouble at school? Issues with friends? Boy problems?" Perhaps. Lorelei shook her head, face burning with shame. "No, it's not that. It's the thoughts. They won't stop. And if I don't do certain things, I feel like something terrible will happen." Dr. Peters smiled, indulgently. "That's called magical thinking. It's quite common at your age. You'll grow out of it." "But it's affecting her life," her mother insisted. "She missed her grandmother's birthday because she couldn't stop cleaning the bathroom." Dr. Peters considered this. "Have you tried simply not doing these rituals, pushing through the discomfort?" Lorelei stared at him in disbelief. If she could simply not do them, wouldn't she have stopped already? "I can't," she whispered. "Can't or won't." Dr. Peters countered. "Sometimes we give these nervous habits too much power by indulging them." He turned back to her mother. "I don't see any need for psychiatric referral at this point. She's a healthy young woman with normal teenage anxiety. More structure, less screen time, perhaps a sport to channel that energy that should do the trick." In the car ride home, her mother seemed relieved. "See, Dr. Peters thinks you're fine. Just stressed." Lorelei stared out the window, feeling more alone than ever. The doctor's dismissal had confirmed her parents' belief that she was simply being dramatic, seeking attention, but the gnawing anxiety in her chest told a different story. That night, after checking her bedroom door 8 times, Lorelei did something she'd never done before. She searched the internet for answers. With shaking hands, she typed, "Can't stop checking things, fear something bad will happen." The results flooded her screen: forums, medical websites, personal blogs, all describing experiences that mirrored her own. People talking about intrusive thoughts, compulsions, rituals. One term appeared repeatedly: obsessive-compulsive disorder. Lorelei read until her eyes burned, a strange mix of terror and relief washing over her. This had a name. Other people experienced it. She wasn't alone. She wasn't making it up, but the relief was short-lived. Having a name for her suffering didn't mean her parents would believe her, especially after Dr. Peters' dismissal. It didn't mean she could access proper help. It didn't stop the thoughts or ease the crushing weight of her compulsions. It just meant she now carried another secret, the knowledge that she was battling something real, something recognized by medicine. While everyone around her dismissed it as teenage drama, the Riverdale University acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday. Full academic scholarship. Lorelei held the crisp paper in trembling hands, savoring the weight of the words. 2 states away, a fresh start, freedom. Her parents were ecstatic, of course. Their daughter at a prestigious university, tuition covered by her academic achievements. They bragged at dinner parties, posted proud announcements on social media, framed the acceptance letter in the living room. They didn't realize that for Lorelei, Riverdale represented more than academic opportunity. It was escape. Distance from the house where every room held the memory of a panic attack, from the parents who saw her suffering as weakness, from the daily pretense that she was fine. Moving day came with a flurry of cardboard boxes and tearful goodbyes. Parents' tears, not hers. Lorelei felt only lightness as she arranged her new dorm room, methodically unpacking her belongings. Here, no one would question why she needed to arrange her books alphabetically. No one would sigh impatiently while she checked the lock 3 times before leaving. For a few precious weeks, the freedom felt like therapy itself. Without the constant pressure to hide her compulsions, they seemed to ease slightly. Her roommate, Zoe, was a music major who spent most of her time at practice rooms. The solitude was blissful, but OCD doesn't disappear with a change of scenery. By mid-October, the temporary relief had faded. Midterms approached, and with them, the crushing pressure to perform. The rituals intensified, expanded, consumed more time. Checked the stove. There was no stove in her dorm, but she checked the spot where a stove would be. Touch each textbook 3 times before opening it. Reread each paragraph until the words felt right. "Dude, "Are you okay?" Zoe asked one night, finding Lorelei still awake at 3 a.m., rewriting lecture notes for the fourth time. "You've been at this for hours." "Just being thorough," Lorelei replied, the familiar lie slipping easily from her lips. But Zoe, unlike her parents, didn't dismiss her concerns. Instead, she sat on the edge of Lorelei's bed, brow furrowed with genuine worry. "This isn't normal," she said gently. "You're exhausted all the time. You're missing meals to study material you already know. I hear you getting up at night to check the door." Lorelei's throat tightened. She'd been so careful, so quiet. But of course Zoe had noticed. How could she not? "Have you talked to someone at the health center?" Zoe asked. "They have counselors there. It's free for students." The suggestion sparked both terror and desperate hope. What if they dismissed her too, like Dr. Peters? What if they confirmed her parents' belief that she was just seeking attention? But what if they didn't? What if they actually helped? The Campus Counseling Center was a small, nondescript building near the student union. Lorelei walked past it 3 times before finding the courage to enter. The intake form asked about her symptoms, her history, her family. She checked boxes that described her reality: unwanted, intrusive thoughts, repetitive behaviors, significant distress, interference with daily activities. Dr. Melissa Chen was nothing like Dr. Peters. She listened without interruption as Lorelei described her rituals, her fears, the constant exhaustion of living inside her mind. She didn't smile indulgently or suggest that Lorelei simply try harder. Instead, she nodded with understanding. "What you're describing," she said after Lorelei finished, "sounds very consistent with obsessive-compulsive disorder." The words hung in the air, simultaneously validating and terrifying. Lorelei had suspected this since that night of desperate internet searching, but hearing it from a professional made it real in a way her own research hadn't. "It's a neurobiological condition," Dr. Chen continued, "not a character flaw, and most importantly, it's treatable." Treatable. The word felt like a lifeline thrown into churning waters. For the first time in years, Lorelei allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where her mind wasn't her enemy, where she wasn't fighting a secret battle every waking moment. "I'd like to help you," Dr. Chen said, "if you're willing to work with me." Lorelei paced the length of her dorm room, phone clutched in her sweating palm. 3 sessions with Dr. Chen had given her more insight into her condition and more courage than she'd had in years. Today was the day she would tell her parents. They deserved to know. And maybe, just maybe, with an official diagnosis, they would finally understand. She hit the speed dial for home, heart hammering against her ribs. Her mother answered on the 3rd ring. "Lorelei, what a lovely surprise. We were just talking about you at the Hendersons' dinner party last night. Margaret's son got into Riverdale too, but without a scholarship." "She was so impressed, Mom," Lorelei interrupted, her voice steadier. Then she felt, "I need to tell you and Dad something important." "Is he there?" A pause. "Yes, he's here. Is everything all right?" "Your grades, my grades are fine. It's something else. Can you put the phone on speaker?" Shuffling sounds, then her father's voice. "Lorelei, what's going on?" She took a deep breath. "I've been seeing someone at the Campus Counseling Center, a psychologist." Silence, then her mother, voice tight with concern. "Are you depressed? Is it the pressure?" "Your father and I have always said academics come first, but your health." "I'm not depressed," Lorelei said. "I've been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD." More silence. Lorelei pressed on, the words tumbling out in a rehearsed rush. "It explains everything. The checking, the cleaning, the rituals, the fears. It's a neurobiological condition. Dr. Chen says it's likely I've had it since childhood, but it got worse in my teens. There are treatments that can help. I've already started therapy, and we're discussing medication options." She paused, waiting for a response. Validation, relief, anything. Her father cleared his throat. "These college therapists are very quick to label things, Lorelei. They see troubled kids all day. Everything looks like a disorder to them." Lorelei's stomach dropped. "Dad, this isn't just a label. It explains everything I've been struggling with for years." "Sweetheart," her mother interjected, "everyone has quirks. I checked the iron twice before leaving the house. That doesn't mean I have a disorder." "It's not the same," Lorelei insisted, frustration building. "My entire day is controlled by these thoughts and rituals. It's exhausting. It's painful. Have you tried just working through it?" her father interrupted. Mental toughness goes a long way. When I was in law school, this isn't about mental toughness. Lorelei's voice rose. This is a recognized medical condition. Would you tell someone with diabetes to just tough it out? Her father's tone hardened. That's not a fair comparison, and you know it. Richard, her mother murmured. Maybe we should listen. No, Catherine, I'm not going to sit here and let some campus counselor convince our daughter she has a mental illness after a few sessions. These places are looking for patients, not solutions. Tears of frustration burned in Lorelei's eyes. Why had she expected anything different? They'd never believed her before. Why would a diagnosis change that? Lorelei, her mother said softly. Couldn't you just try a little harder? You've always been able to accomplish anything you set your mind to. The familiar Fraser Davis family mantra felt like a slap, as if she hadn't been trying, as if she'd chosen this, as if the hours of agony, the bloody hands, the isolation, the terror, were just a lack of effort on her part. I have to go, she said, voice hollow. I have class. She ended the call before they could respond, then sank onto her bed, phone dropping from her numb fingers. The room blurred through her tears. She'd hoped for understanding, for support, for acknowledgement of her suffering. Instead, she'd received the same dismissal, just in new words. In that moment, Lorelei made a decision that would alter the course of her life. She would stop trying to make her parents understand. She would stop sharing her mental health journey with them. She would find her support elsewhere, among people who didn't require her to justify her pain. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. We only want what's best for you. Sweetheart, let's talk more about this when you come home for Thanksgiving. Lorelei didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Junior year arrived with autumn leaves and crushing pressure. Lorelei's course load advanced psychology, research methods, statistics, and 2 electives demanded perfection. Her scholarship required a 3.8 GPA. Her parents expected nothing less than excellence, and her OCD demanded increasingly complex rituals that devoured her time and energy. By October, something had to give. It was her mind that broke first. The breakdown came during Dr. Chen's regular Tuesday session. Lorelei arrived 20 minutes late, having been caught in a loop of checking her research paper for errors, not just grammar or content, but whether the words felt right on the page. I can't do this anymore, she whispered, collapsing into the familiar armchair. I'm checking things 50, 60 times. I'm sleeping 3 hours a night. I missed my midterm because I couldn't leave my room until I'd arranged everything perfectly, and then I couldn't stop arranging it. Dr. Chun's face showed concern but not surprise. They'd been working together for nearly 2 years, long enough for her to recognize when Lorelei was reaching a breaking point. I think we need to consider more intensive treatment, she said gently, and perhaps a medical leave of absence. The words should have terrified Lorelei. Leave of absence meant failure, meant disappointing her parents, meant admitting weakness. Instead, they felt like permission to breathe. The university process was surprisingly straightforward. Medical documentation from Dr. Chen, forms signed by the dean of students, a note to professors explaining her absence. Her scholarship would be suspended but reinstated when she returned. The administrative pieces fell into place with an ease that contrasted sharply with the chaos in her mind. Telling her parents was another matter entirely. Absolutely not, her father declared when she called with the news. You don't throw away an opportunity like Riverdale over some ... anxiety. It's not some anxiety, Dad, Lorelei said, too exhausted for anger. I'm barely functioning. My therapist thinks I need specialized treatment. And who's paying for this specialized treatment? He demanded. Because if you think I have health insurance through school, she interrupted, and savings from my campus job. I'm not asking for money. Her mother's voice, softer but no less distressed. Lorelei, what will people think? A leave of absence sounds so ... serious. It was serious. That was the point. But Lorelei no longer had the energy to make them understand. I've already filed the paperwork, she said simply. I start intensive treatment next week. Dr. Ramon specialized in OCD at a clinic 40 minutes from campus. Unlike the generalized approach at the counseling center, her program was specifically designed for OCD sufferers. The first session was a detailed assessment for hours of questions about Lorelei's symptoms, their impact, her history. You've been dealing with this for a very long time without proper treatment, Dr. Ramon said, reviewing her notes. That stops now. The treatment plan was aggressive. 3 sessions per week of exposure and response prevention therapy, the gold standard for OCD treatment. The concept was simultaneously simple and terrifying. Lorelei would deliberately face her fears without performing the rituals that temporarily eased her anxiety, touch a doorknob she believed was contaminated, not wash her hands, leave her apartment without checking the locks and sit with the anxiety that followed, write a paper without reviewing it compulsively and submit it with potential errors intact. Your brain is like a fire alarm that keeps going off when there's no fire, Dr. Rahman explained. Every time you perform a compulsion, you're reinforcing the false belief that there was danger and your ritual prevented it. We need to retrain your brain to recognize these false alarms. The first weeks were excruciating. Lorelei cried through sessions, begged to perform her rituals, experienced panic attacks that left her gasping for air, but slowly, painfully, progress emerged, an hour without checking. A night with only one wake-up to verify the door was locked. A paper written once, not 5 times. Small victories that felt monumental. The goal isn't to eliminate anxiety, Dr. Rahman reminded her. It's to change your relationship with it, to recognize that you can feel uncertain, uncomfortable, even terrified and still function, still live. By spring, Lorelei had developed a new vocabulary for her condition, new tools for managing her symptoms, and a new understanding of herself. The OCD wasn't gone. Dr. Rahman was clear that complete remission was rare, but it no longer controlled her every waking moment. The blog began as homework. Document your journey, Dr. Rahman had suggested during their final session before Lorelei's return to university. Writing can be therapeutic, and tracking your progress may help during difficult periods. Lorelei created the account that night, The Checking Girl, an anonymous space to chronicle her battle with OCD. Her first post was simple, just 3 paragraphs, describing her diagnosis and treatment. She expected no readers beyond herself, and perhaps Dr. Rahman. Within a week, the post had 73 views and 5 comments. Thank you for putting into words what I couldn't explain to my family. I thought I was the only one who counted ceiling tiles to prevent disasters. Reading this made me cry. I'm not alone. Have you tried medication? My daughter just started Prozac. Is checking different from hoarding? My husband has so much stuff. Lorelei stared at the comments in disbelief. Real people, reaching out from the void of the internet, finding resonance in her words. She wrote a second post, then a third. Each one drew more readers, more comments, more questions. The blog became a lifeline not just for her readers, but for Lorelei herself. The anonymity allowed her to be brutally honest about her experiences in a way she couldn't be with her parents, her professors, or even her friends. She described the physical sensation of panic when a ritual was interrupted, the exhaustion of constantly monitoring her thoughts, the shame of hiding her condition for so long. One evening, she wrote about her childhood. I was 8 when the rituals began. Simple things, at first organizing toys, checking homework multiple times. My parents called it perfectionism, praised my attention to detail. By 12, I was checking locks, stoves, windows, terrified that my negligence would harm my family. My parents called it dawdling, wasting time. By 16, I was trapped in loops of counting, checking, repeating. My parents called it drama, attention-seeking. No one saw the prison my mind had become. That post went viral, picked up by mental health advocates, shared across social media platforms, referenced in online articles about childhood OCD. Lorelei watched in amazement as the view count climbed 1,000, then 5,000, then 20,000. The comments section filled with similar stories. Children whose symptoms were dismissed as personality quirks, teenagers told to just stop behaviors they couldn't control, adults still carrying the shame of being labeled dramatic or difficult for a neurobiological condition they hadn't chosen. Began receiving emails from readers seeking advice, sharing their stories, asking questions about treatment options. She wasn't a therapist, she made that clear in every response, but she could offer understanding, validation, the recognition that so many had been denied. As her senior year progressed, The Checking Girl grew from personal diary to informal resource. Lorelei added pages about OCD symptoms, treatment options, recommended reading. She interviewed Dr. Rahman for a feature on exposure and response prevention therapy. She created a glossary of terms that might help readers articulate their experiences. 2 skeptical family members. The blog remained anonymous. Lorelei wasn't ready to attach her name to her condition, to become the OCD girl in her real life. Online, she could be an advocate while maintaining separation between her condition and her identity. Besides, anonymity protected her from her parents. They still didn't fully accept her diagnosis, still made comments about overcoming these nervous habits when she visited home. If they knew she was publicly discussing her mental health and, by extension, their dismissal of a fragile peace between them would shatter that sometimes. Late at night, Lorelei wondered what they would think if they read her blog. Would they recognize themselves in her descriptions of dismissive parents? Would they understand, finally, the depth of her suffering? Or would they see only betrayal, their family's private struggles exposed for public consumption? She never expected to find out. The internet was vast, her blog just one small corner of it. What were the chances her parents would stumble upon it, much less connected to their daughter? But as the checking girl grew in popularity, as its reach extended beyond OCD forums to mainstream mental health discussions, those chances increased. The collision of Lorelei's two worlds, the public advocate and the private daughter, was approaching, inevitable as gravity. Riverdale University's commencement ceremony bloomed across the quad like a sea of black caps and burgundy gowns. Lorelei adjusted her honors cords, gold for summa cum laude, blue for psychology honors on, scanned the crowd for her parents. They had texted that they were sitting in section D, row 7. She spotted them finally, her father in his crisp navy suit, her mother in a floral dress and wide-brimmed hat. They waved enthusiastically when they saw her looking, their faces bright with pride. 4 years ago, Lorelei had arrived at this university desperate for escape. Now she was leaving it, transformed, not cured of her OCD, but equipped to manage it, not estranged from her parents, but maintaining careful boundaries around her mental health, not isolated, but connected to a community of readers who understood her struggles in ways her family never had. The ceremony proceeded with predictable pomp, speeches about future possibilities, reminiscences about college traditions, the rich conferring of degrees. When Lorelei crossed the stage, Lorelei Davis, summa cum laude, she heard her father's distinctive whoop above the general applause. Despite everything, the sound warmed her. Afterward, her parents enveloped her in hugs, cameras ready for the obligatory graduation photos. "We are so proud of you," her mother said, eyes glistening. "Highest honors, graduate school acceptance. You've accomplished everything you set out to do." Not everything, Lorelei thought. They had no idea about her most significant accomplishment, building a mental health resource that helped thousands. The Checking Girl had become more than a blog. It was a community, a platform, a lifeline for people struggling with OCD and related conditions. "Let's celebrate," her father declared. "Reservations at La Maison at 6. Your mother pulled strings to get us a table there, booked solid for graduation weekend." The restaurant was elegant and crowded with other celebrating families. As they waited for their table, Lorelei noticed her mother greeting an elegantly dressed couple, Catherine, Richard. "Congratulations on your graduate." The woman embraced Lorelei's mother warmly. "And this must be Lorelei. Your parents have told us so much about you." Introductions were made. Barbara and Thomas Wilson, longtime friends of her parents from their country club. Polite conversation flowed, questions about Lorelei's graduate program, comments on the ceremony, gossip about mutual acquaintances. "Oh, before I forget," Barbara said suddenly, turning to Catherine. "Did you see that article I sent you, about young people and mental health? There was this remarkable blog it mentioned, written by a college student with OCD, so insightful about how families often dismiss the early signs. I've been sharing it with everyone in our support group." Lorelei froze, her champagne glass halfway to her lips. "Support group?" her mother echoed, looking confused. "For families of people with mental health conditions," Barbara explained. "Thomas's niece was diagnosed with severe anxiety last year. It's been eye-opening for us. This blog, The Checking Girl, it's called, has really helped us understand what she's going through." Lorelei's pulse thundered in her ears. Her blog. Barbara was talking about her blog. "I don't think I saw that article," her mother said, glancing at Lorelei with mild curiosity. "What was it about, exactly?" "It was about how conditions like OCD often appear in childhood but go undiagnosed because parents mistake the symptoms for personality traits or behavioral problems," Barbara explained, unwittingly echoing Lorelei's most viral post. This blogger described how her parents called her checking behaviors drama and attention-seeking when she was actually suffering from a serious condition. It was heartbreaking but so educational. Lorelei's father frowned slightly. Sounds like this blogger has some issues with her parents. Oh, I didn't read it that way, Barbara said. It seemed more like she was trying to help other families avoid the same misunderstandings. I'll resend the link, Catherine. It's really worth reading. Our table is ready, Lorelei interrupted, desperate to change the subject. Shall we? As they followed the host to their table, Lorelei caught her mother's thoughtful gaze. Had she made the connection? Did she suspect? The idea sent a spike of anxiety through Lorelei's chest. She wasn't ready for that conversation, not today. Not during what was supposed to be a celebration, but watching Barbara Wilson talk so passionately about the checking girl, unaware that its author sat across from her. Lorelei felt a strange new emotion cutting through her anxiety. Pride. Her words were reaching people, changing perspectives, perhaps even preventing other children from experiencing the dismissal she had endured for the first time. Lorelei wondered if remaining anonymous was still the right choice. Graduate school consumed Lorelei's life. For the next 2 years, clinical psychology demanded rigorous study, practical training, and endless research papers, between classes, internships, and her own therapy maintenance. The Checking Girl blog received less attention than before, though she still posted monthly updates and responded to reader comments. What began as a personal diary had evolved into something more purposeful. Readers shared how her writing had helped them seek diagnosis, start treatment, or explain their condition to skeptical family members. Mental health professionals emailed to say they recommended her blog to patients. A high school psychology teacher asked permission to use her posts in a unit on anxiety disorders. The blog's growing influence planted a seed in Lorelei's mind. Her graduate research focused on public perceptions of OCD and stigma reduction. Academic work inspired directly by her personal experiences. The blog and her professional aspirations were converging, but her identity remained split. Lorelei Davis, promising psychology student, and the Checking Girl, anonymous mental health advocate. The catalyst for change came during her final semester. Dr. Patricia Norwood, a prominent researcher in anxiety disorders, was seeking speakers for a mental health symposium focused on lived experiences. Your perspective as both a clinician reigning and someone with OCD would be invaluable, Dr. Norwood explained after approaching Lorelei following a department lecture. We need voices that can bridge the gap between professional knowledge and personal experience. Lorelei hesitated. I've never spoken publicly about my condition. Consider it, Dr. Norwood urged. Your story could help destigmatize mental health conditions among future clinicians. Sometimes the most powerful education comes from hearing directly from someone who's walked the path. That night, Lorelei revisited her earliest blog posts, raw accounts of her struggles, her parents' dismissal, her journey toward treatment. The anonymity that had once felt necessary now seemed like a barrier. By keeping her identity separate from her advocacy, wasn't she perpetuating the very stigma she hoped to combat? 3 weeks later, Lorelei stood at a podium in the university's conference center, facing an audience of psychology students, faculty, and mental health professionals. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. My name is Lorelei Davis, she began, and for the past 4 years, I've been writing anonymously as the Checking Girl, documenting my experiences with obsessive-compulsive disorder. A murmur rippled through the audience. Several people nodded in recognition of the blog name. Today, I'm stepping out from behind that anonymity because I believe that mental health conditions should be discussed with the same openness as physical ailments. My OCD is part of me, but it doesn't define me, just as my brown hair or my love of classical music doesn't define me. As she continued her presentation, weaving clinical information with personal narrative, Lorelei felt a weight lifting. This integration of her identities, the professional and the personal, the academic and the experiential, felt right, necessary. The response was overwhelming. After the symposium, attendees lined up to speak with her, to share their own stories, to thank her for her honesty, to discuss collaboration opportunities. Dr. Norwood introduced her to the editor of a psychology journal, interested in first-person accounts of mental health treatment. That evening, Lorelei published a new blog post, the first ever accompanied by her real name and photo. She titled it simply, Integration. The post ended with an announcement. She would be launching a podcast on invisible disabilities, combining expert interviews with personal narratives. The first episode would feature her own story. It never occurred to her that her parents might be listening. Margaret Henderson's Facebook page was a carefully curated showcase of her perfect life, grandchildren's achievements, vacation photos, inspirational quotes, and occasional articles that portrayed her as intellectually engaged but never controversial. Catherine Davis scrolled idly through her friend's timeline while waiting for her hair appointment, the familiar parade of smiling faces and sunsets providing mindless distraction. Then a shared link caught her eye, breaking the silence. Understanding OCD beyond stereotypes. The preview showed a young woman's photo, her daughter's photo. Catherine's finger hovered over the screen, momentarily frozen in disbelief. There was Lorelei, professional and poised, beneath a headline identifying her as both a clinical psychology doctoral candidate and the creator of the Checking Girl blog. The Checking Girl, the blog Barbara Wilson had mentioned at Lorelei's graduation dinner 2 years ago. The blog about parents who dismissed their child's OCD symptoms as a behavior. Catherine clicked the link with trembling fingers. The article opened with Lorelei's personal story, her childhood symptoms, her parents' dismissal, her eventual diagnosis in college, her years of treatment. The clinical language was interspersed with intimate details that only someone who had lived in their home could know. Checking the locks 17 times while my father sighed impatiently. Double quotes. Scrubbing the bathroom floor until my hands bled. My mother standing in the doorway asking why I couldn't just hurry up. Being told that my tears were dramatics when I was actually experiencing panic attacks. Catherine's chest tightened as she recognized herself in these descriptions. Not a monster, but a mother who had failed to understand her child's suffering, who had interpreted pain as manipulation, who had responded to desperate pleas for help with impatience and dismissal. Before she could process the revelation, her phone rang. Richard's name flashed on the screen. "Have you seen this?" he demanded, without preamble. "Lorelei's all over the internet talking about how we neglected her mental health. James Whitaker just texted me about it. He said his wife follows some psychology page that shared an article about her." Catherine closed her eyes. Of course, Richard would focus on their public image rather than their daughter's pain. "I'm reading it now," she said quietly. "Well, what are we going to do about this? She's making us sound like neglectful parents. People we know are reading this, Catherine. Maybe we were neglectful." Richard, the words slipped out before she could reconsider them. "Maybe we did ignore signs that should have been obvious." His voice hardened. "That's ridiculous. We provided everything for her. The best schools, the best opportunities. We supported her ambitions, but not her struggles." Catherine whispered, the truth of it settling heavily in her chest. "We never believed her when she tried to tell us something was wrong." Silence stretched between them, taut with 3 decades of marriage and the uncomfortable realization that they had failed their only child in a fundamental way. "I'm calling her," Richard finally said. Richard wait, but he had already hung up. Catherine stared at her phone, then at the article still open on her screen. There was a photo of Lorelei recording her podcast, a transcript of her discussing treatment options, links to resources for families. This wasn't just a personal story, it was educational, professional. Her daughter had transformed her suffering into something that helped others. Catherine scrolled to the bottom of the article, where a Listen Now button invited readers to hear the latest podcast episode. She tapped it, her hairdresser forgotten, and Lorelei's voice filled her ears, confident, compassionate, articulate, a voice she barely recognized, speaking truths she had never allowed herself to hear. Her phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "She's not answering. This is unacceptable." Catherine didn't reply. Instead, she continued listening to her daughter's voice, truly listening. Perhaps for the first time, Lorelei's apartment was a sanctuary of calculated comfort, soothing colors, minimal clutter, spaces designed to accommodate both productivity and occasional OCD flare-ups. She'd created an environment where her symptoms could exist without consuming her life. Now her parents sat stiffly on her couch, disrupting that careful balance. They'd called 3 days after discovering her blog, insisting on visiting. "We need to discuss this in person," her father had said, the edge in his voice unmistakable. She'd agreed, partly from curiosity, partly from a newfound confidence in her boundaries. This wasn't the terrified college student afraid of disappointing them. This was Dr. Lorelei Davis, mental health advocate with a platform and purpose. Her mother broke the awkward silence first. "Your place is lovely. So, organized." The hesitation before organized spoke volumes. In the past, her mother might have said neat or tidy. Now, aware of Lorelei's OCD, she second-guessed even simple observations. "Thank you," Lorelei said. "Would you like some tea?" The mundane rituals of hospitality, boiling water, arranging cups, provided temporary reprieve from the tension. But once they were seated again, steaming mugs in hand, her father cleared his throat. "Lorelei, we need to talk about this, blog, this podcast, the things you're saying about our family." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm not saying anything that isn't true. You're making it sound like we didn't care about you," he countered, leaning forward. "Like we intentionally ignored your suffering. That's not fair, and it's certainly not the whole story." "What's the whole story, then?" Lorelei asked quietly. Her father frowned. "We gave you everything. The best education, every opportunity. We supported your goals. When you needed space, we gave it to you. When you needed independence, we didn't interfere. And when I needed you to believe me about my mental health," he flinched slightly, "we didn't understand. How could we? You were always so capable, so accomplished. It seemed like you were just being dramatic." "Richard," her mother murmured, a warning in her tone. "What?" "I'm being honest. The behaviors seemed voluntary, controllable. It didn't look like a medical condition to us." "Because you didn't want it to," Lorelei said, surprised by the calmness in her voice. Years of therapy had given her the distance to see her parents, not as villains, but as flawed people with their own limitations. "Mental illness didn't fit into your vision of our perfect family." Her mother set down her teacup with a clatter. "That's not fair, Lorelei. We were doing our best with the information we had. Did you research OCD when I told you about my diagnosis? Did you read any books, join any parent support groups, consult any specialists?" Her parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "That's what I thought," Lorelei continued. "You didn't want information, you wanted me to get over it." Her father's face reddened. "And now you're publicly sharing all this with strangers. Do you have any idea how many people we know have seen your content?" "James Whittaker asked me if I was coming to terms with my daughter's revelations about our parenting at the club. Margaret Henderson's book group is apparently discussing your blog. Of course, his reputation, always the priority." "I'm sorry it's uncomfortable for you," Lorelei said, not feeling sorry at all. "But my work is helping people. I get messages every day from OCD sufferers whose families now understand them better because of my content. From parents who recognized symptoms in their children and got them help early, instead of dismissing them." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I wish we'd been those parents for you." The simple admission, the first acknowledgement of failure from either parent, caught Lorelei off guard. Her rehearsed responses dissolved, leaving raw emotion in their place. "I wish you had been, too," she whispered. The package arrived at her parents' house 3 days after their uncomfortable reunion. Inside, 2 books on understanding OCD, a pamphlet about supporting loved ones with mental health conditions, and a handwritten note from Lorelei. "If you're ready to understand, these might help." It was an olive branch. Not quite forgiveness, but an opening, a chance for education that came 20 years too late. Catherine opened the first book that evening. Richard found her still reading at midnight, yellow highlighter in hand, pages already marked with dozens of fluorescent streaks. "Coming to bed?" he asked, hovering in the doorway of their living room. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Did you know that OCD often appears in childhood? That children as young as 6 can show symptoms? That it's one of the most debilitating mental illnesses when untreated?" Her voice cracked slightly. "We missed so many signs, Richard." He shifted uncomfortably. "Catherine, we can't change the past." "No, but we can educate ourselves now." She held up the book. "I'm learning things about our daughter that I should have known years ago." Richard hesitated, then crossed the room and picked up the second book. "I'll start this one tomorrow," he said quietly. The education began in earnest, then a crash course in the condition that had shaped their daughters. Life without their understanding or support. Catherine joined an online support group for families of people with OCD. Richard, more private but equally committed, read Lorelei's entire blog archive in one sleepless night. The chronological narrative of her suffering unfolding before him, like an indictment. "I had no idea," he told Catherine afterward, his voice hollow, "the extent of it. The constant fear she lived with, the physical pain of the rituals, 1 week after sending the package, Lorelei received a text from her mother. "Thank you for the resources. We're learning so much. Would you be willing to recommend more?" Lorelei sent links to online lectures, documentaries, research, curated curriculum for parents trying to understand their adult child's mental health journey. She included articles specifically addressing the impact of early dismissal on OCD sufferers, material that didn't spare her parents' feelings but might foster genuine understanding. They absorbed it all. Catherine began mentioning concepts like intrusive thoughts and exposure therapy in their conversations. Richard referenced specific blog posts, asking tentative questions about experiences Lorelei had described. Their newfound interest was both validating and disorienting. For years, Lorelei had craved their understanding, their acknowledgement of her reality. Now that they were finally offering it, she wasn't sure how to respond. The wounds of dismissal had scarred over. Reopening them, even for healing, was painful. 2 weeks into their self-education, her father called. "I want to apologize," he said without preamble. "Properly apologize." Lorelei sat down, unprepared for the directness. "I'm listening. I failed you." His voice, usually so confident, wavered slightly. "I was so focused on the image of our family, on what I thought strength looked like, that I couldn't see your actual struggle. I dismissed your pain because acknowledging it would have meant admitting that I couldn't fix it, and that wasn't acceptable to me." The simple admission, unadorned, undefended, brought tears to Lorelei's eyes. "Thank you for saying that," she managed. "There's more," he continued. "I want to understand better, not just intellectually, from books. I want to understand what your experience is like, as much as someone without OCD can. Would you, would you be willing to talk about it? When you're ready." Lorelei closed her eyes, absorbing the request. Her father, who had once told her to get over her OCD, was now asking to understand it. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I would like that." The auditorium of Riverdale Community Center hummed with anticipation. Breaking the silence, "Mental Health in Families," read the banner stretched across the stage. Lorelei paced backstage, reviewing her notes one last time. As the keynote speaker, she would be addressing an audience of 300, her largest yet. 5 minutes. "Dr. Davis," the event coordinator said, poking her head through the curtain. Lorelei nodded, smoothing her blazer. Public speaking still triggered her anxiety, but she'd learned to channel the nervous energy, to use it rather than fight it. Her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague. "Front row seats still empty. Want me to find someone to fill them?" Before she could reply, another message appeared from her mother. "We're running late. Save those front row seats." Almost there. Lorelei stared at the screen in disbelief. Her parents were coming. She hadn't explicitly invited them, assuming they wouldn't want to hear her discuss their family dynamics in public. Yet here they were, apparently planning to sit front and center. She had just enough time to text back a quick okay before the coordinator returned to lead her to the stage. The lights dimmed, and the event director made her introduction. Clinical psychologist, mental health advocate, creator of the Checking Girl blog and podcast, Dr. Lorelei Davis. Applause rippled through the auditorium as Lorelei took the stage. She adjusted the microphone, scanned the audience, and there they were, slipping into the reserved front row seats. Her father in a charcoal suit, her mother in an emerald dress, both looking slightly flushed from rushing. Her carefully prepared opening suddenly felt inadequate. She had planned to begin with statistics, with clinical observations about the impact of family dynamics on mental health outcomes. But seeing her parents, their unfamiliar vulnerability, their willingness to show up, changed something. "Thank you for that introduction," she began. "I want to start with a truth that took me years to understand. Mental illness doesn't happen in isolation. It happens within families, within communities, within systems that can either support recovery or hinder it." She made deliberate eye contact with her parents before continuing. "My own journey with obsessive-compulsive disorder began in childhood, though it wasn't diagnosed until I was 19. For years, my symptoms were misinterpreted by teachers, by doctors, and yes, by my parents, who are here today." A murmur rippled through the audience. Some heads turned toward the front row. Her father straightened his shoulders, meeting the curious glances with dignity. Her mother reached for his hand. "I used to think of this as a simple narrative. I was suffering. They didn't understand. They failed me. But human relationships are rarely that straightforward, and healing is never that simple. For the next 40 minutes, Lorelei spoke about the complexity of mental illness within family systems, how parents can miss signs, not out of neglect but out of a misguided desire to see their children as resilient, how medical professionals sometimes fail to identify mental health conditions in high-achieving children, how cultural stigma prevents open discussion of psychological suffering. She was candid about her parents' initial dismissal of her symptoms, but also acknowledged their recent efforts to understand their reading, their questions, their willingness to re-examine long-held beliefs. Recovery isn't just about the person with the diagnosis, she concluded. It's about healing the entire system. Sometimes that means having difficult conversations. Sometimes it means revisiting painful memories. Always, it means being willing to listen and learn. The applause was thunderous. As Lorelei thanked the audience and prepared to leave the stage, she noticed her mother wiping away tears. Her father sat perfectly still, his expression a complex mixture of pride and regret. During the reception that followed, people lined up to speak with her, to share their stories, to ask questions, to request resources. Her parents stood slightly apart, watching as she navigated these interactions with professional compassion. Eventually, the crowd thinned, and Lorelei made her way to where they waited. "That was," her father began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Illuminating," her mother finished. "Painful to hear, but illuminating." Lorelei studied their faces, searching for signs of anger or defensiveness. She found none. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "I know it couldn't have been easy to hear." Her father cleared his throat. "We needed to hear it. All of it." Dr. Maya Patel's office was designed for comfort: soft lighting, comfortable seating, arranged in a conversational triangle, abstract art in calming blues and greens. As a family therapist specializing in mental health reconciliation, she had created a space where difficult truths could be spoken without shame. Lorelei sat on one end of the couch, her father on the other, her mother in an armchair between them. The physical arrangement mirrored their emotional positions, connected but separate, sharing space but maintaining distance. "I appreciate all three of you being here," Dr. Patel began. "Family therapy can be challenging, but it offers an opportunity for healing that individual therapy sometimes cannot provide." Richard shifted uncomfortably. He had agreed to this session reluctantly, more comfortable with private reading than public vulnerability. Catherine sat perfectly still, hands clasped in her lap, the way she always did when nervous. "Perhaps we could start by having each person share what they hope to gain from our time together," Dr. Patel suggested. Catherine spoke first. "I want to understand how we missed the signs for so long, and," her voice wavered slightly, "I want to know if Lorelei can forgive us." Richard cleared his throat. "I want to move forward, to establish a healthier relationship based on BAFTA understanding." Lorelei took a deep breath. "I want to stop carrying the weight of unspoken pain. I want us to acknowledge what happened without minimizing it or making excuses. And then, maybe, we can build something new." Dr. Patel nodded. "Those are all valid goals. Let's begin by establishing some facts that everyone can agree on." What followed was a careful excavation of the past: the first signs of OCD that her parents had misinterpreted, the escalating symptoms they had dismissed, the breaking points that had been framed as behavioral problems rather than mental health crises. Richard struggled to hear these recollections without becoming defensive. Several times he began to justify their actions. "We didn't have the information then that we have now, or you have to understand." Mental health wasn't discussed the same way before. Catching himself, acknowledging that explanations could sound like excuses. The breakthrough came an hour into the session, as they discussed a particularly painful memory: Lorelei's panic attack before a piano recital when she was 15, which her father had attributed to attention-seeking and drama. "I remember being so angry," Richard admitted. "We'd paid for years of lessons, driven you to every practice, and then right before the recital, you were hyperventilating, saying you couldn't perform. I thought you were being ungrateful, manipulative even." "I was terrified," Lorelei said quietly. "Not of performing. I'd practiced until the piece was perfect. I was terrified because I'd developed a new ritual. I needed to play the opening measure exactly 8 times before any performance, and there wasn't time. When I couldn't complete the ritual, I became convinced something terrible would happen to you and Mom." Richard's face crumpled. "I had no idea. I didn't understand." "You didn't try to understand," Lorelei corrected gently. "You had already decided what was happening." He didn't argue. Instead, He did something Lorelei had rarely seen in her 30 years. He wept, not dramatically, but with quiet dignity streaming down his face as he nodded in acknowledgement. "You're right," he said simply. "I failed you." Catherine reached across the space between them, taking his hand. "We both did. There's something else I need to tell you," she continued, turning to Laura. "Something I've never shared with anyone, not even your father." Richard looked at his wife in surprise. "I've struggled with anxiety my entire life," Catherine confessed. "Not OCD, but persistent worry, occasional panic attacks. My mother called it nerves and told me to push through it. So that's what I did. I pushed through. I hid it. I pretended to be fine. When you started showing signs of anxiety, I couldn't face it. Acknowledging your condition would have meant confronting my own." The revelation hung in the air, shifting the narrative they'd all believed, not just dismissive parents and a suffering child, but a family pattern of silence around mental health, transmitted across generations. "Thank you for sharing that," Dr. Patel said gently. "Catherine, that insight is incredibly valuable for understanding your family dynamics." Lorelei studied her mother's face, seeing her perhaps for the first time. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Catherine wiped away a tear. "Because I was ashamed. Because I thought I needed to be strong for you. Because I didn't want you to inherit my weakness." "It's not weakness, Lorelei," and Richard said simultaneously, then looked at each other in surprise. A fragile smile flickered across Catherine's face. "I'm beginning to understand that now." The community center's meeting room was filled beyond capacity. Extra chairs had been brought in, lining the walls to accommodate the unexpected turnout. At the front of the room, Barbara Wilson adjusted the microphone stand, beaming at the assembled audience. "Thank you all for coming to our mental health awareness series," she began. "We're thrilled to have such interest from our community. Today's session is particularly special to me." Lorelei sat in the third row, between her parents. She hadn't planned to attend. This was her mother's friend's event, not her professional obligation, but Catherine had asked, almost shyly, if she might come along. "Barbara's featuring your podcast," she'd explained. "She doesn't know we're connected. I thought you might like to see the impact your work is having." So here they were, the three Davises, listening as Barbara Wilson, enthusiastically, introduced an incredible resource for understanding OCD and other anxiety disorders. "This podcast, Beyond Checking, has transformed how I understand my niece's anxiety," Barbara continued. "The host, Dr. Lorelei Davis, combines clinical expertise with personal experience in a way that's both educational and deeply moving." Catherine reached over and squeezed Lorelei's hand. Richard, on her other side, sat with perfect posture, his expression deliberately neutral but his eyes alert. "I've selected a clip from a recent episode about family dynamics and mental health," Barbara said, pressing play on her tablet. Lorelei's recorded voice filled the room. "Recovery isn't a solo journey. It happens within relationships, within families, within communities willing to listen and learn. Sometimes the people who initially misunderstood our suffering become our strongest allies when given the opportunity to understand." Barbara stopped the recording. "That perspective, that compassion toward families who may have misunderstood mental health conditions, has been particularly meaningful to me as I support my brother's family through my niece's treatment." She looked out at the audience. "How many of you have listened to this podcast or read the Checking Girl blog?" Nearly half the room raised their hands, including several of Catherine's social circle women who had known Lorelei since childhood, who had attended her piano recitals and graduation parties, who had no idea that the poised young woman sitting beside Catherine was the creator of the content they'd been sharing and discussing. "The anonymous blog that started it all is now a platform reaching thousands," Barbara continued. "Dr. Davis has transformed her personal struggle into a beacon for others. I encourage all of you to check out her work." As the presentation continued, Catherine leaned close to whisper in Lorelei's ear, "They have no idea they're talking about the girl they watched grow up, the one they used to say was high-strung and intense." There was no bitterness in her mother's voice, only a sort of wonder at the irony. After the presentation, during the refreshment period, Barbara made her way to Catherine, greeting her warmly. "Catherine, I'm so glad you could make it, and Richard too." She embraced both of them before noticing Lorelei. "Oh, and you brought your daughter. How lovely." Catherine smiled. "Barbara, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Lorelei Davis." Barbara's handshake was perfunctory, her attention still on Catherine. "The podcast I mentioned has been such a help with Susan's daughter. Mental health conditions can be so confusing for families. I imagine they can be, Lorelei agreed mildly. Catherine cleared her throat. Barbara, Lorelei is Dr. Davis, the creator of the podcast you just featured. Barbara froze, her coffee cup halfway to her lips. She looked from Catherine to Lorelei, and back again, processing the connection. You're the checking girl, she finally managed. Lorelei nodded. I am. But then, Barbara's gaze shifted to Catherine and Richard, the implications dawning slowly. The parents in your stories, ... An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Richard, who had been standing slightly apart, stepped forward to join his wife and daughter. We didn't understand what our daughter was going through, he said simply. We're learning now. Barbara looked at the three of them, the family she thought she knew, suddenly revealed in a new light. I had no idea, she whispered. Catherine smiled faintly. Neither did we, for far too long. Around them, the room buzzed with conversation, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in their corner. But something significant had shifted. The final wall between Lorelei's public advocacy and private history had crumbled, leaving her standing fully integrated, her parents beside her, no longer hiding from the truth of their family's journey. The morning ritual remained, though transformed. Lorelei still checked her apartment door before leaving, not 17 times, but twice. A reasonable precaution, her therapist called it. The line between OCD compulsion and normal caution was sometimes blurry, but Lorelei had learned to recognize the difference. Was the action driven by debilitating fear or reasonable prudence? Did it consume excessive time? Did refusing to perform it cause overwhelming anxiety? These questions formed a framework for managing her condition, not eliminating it. OCD would always be part of her life, but it no longer controlled her life. Most days were good now. Some were harder, all were hers to live on her terms. Her phone buzzed with a text as she waited for her morning coffee at the campus cafe. Volunteering at the OCD Alliance fundraiser today. Any advice for a first-timer? Dad, Lorelei smiled at the screen. Her father's involvement with the mental health organization had begun tentatively writing checks, attending events, but had evolved into active participation. He now volunteered monthly, helping with everything from fundraising to support group logistics. Just listen, she texted back. That's what people need most. 3 years had passed since her parents had discovered her blog, since the painful conversations had begun, since the slow process of repair had started. Their relationship wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that occasionally reasserted themselves, but it was authentic now, built on truth rather than pretense. Her mother had found her own path to healing, joining a support group for family members of people with OCD. Gradually, she had begun sharing her own experiences with anxiety, first within the safety of the group, then with close friends, eventually becoming an advocate for mental health awareness among her social circle. You've started a revolution among the country club set, Lorelei had teased her recently. Margaret Henderson told me that mental health is all anyone talks about at Bridge Club now. Her mother had laughed, but with a hint of pride. Someone needed to break the silence. Might as well be me. Podcast downloads surpassed 1 million. The blog celebrated its 7th anniversary. Lorelei's clinical practice focused on young adults with anxiety disorders, particularly those from families that had initially minimized their symptoms. She understood them in ways textbooks couldn't teach. But perhaps the most significant measure of change came in the form of an email that arrived on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Dear Dr. Davis, my name is Eliza, and I'm 15. My parents found your podcast after I was diagnosed with OCD last month. They listened to every episode and then sat me down to apologize for not understanding sooner. My dad actually cried, which was weird but kind of amazing. I just wanted to say thank you. Not just for helping me understand what's happening in my brain, but for helping my parents understand too. They're coming to therapy with me now. Things are still hard, but I don't feel so alone anymore. Sincerely, Eliza J. Lorelei read the email twice, tears welling in her eyes. This was why she had started writing, why she had stepped out from behind anonymity, why she had risked the uncomfortable conversations and painful reckonings, for the Elizas of the world, the children whose suffering might be recognized sooner, whose families might learn faster, whose journeys might be different from her own. That evening, she forwarded the email to her parents with a simple message. This is what healing looks like. Her father called almost immediately. I got your email, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It's extraordinary, what you've created. Not just me, Lorelei replied. We're all part of this story now. Later, preparing for bed, Lorelei caught herself arranging her pillows with precise symmetry, an old habit resurfacing during a week of heightened stress. She recognized the behavior, acknowledged it without judgment, and deliberately left one pillow slightly askew. Small victories, continuous practice, ongoing recovery. This was the message she shared with her listeners, her readers, her patients. Mental health conditions aren't battles to be won once and for all, but landscapes to be navigated with increasing skill. The goal isn't perfection, but understanding, not elimination of symptoms, but integration of experience, not silence, but speech, not shame, but courage, not isolation, but community. Lorelei's bloodied fingers on the doorknob had left marks that would never fully fade, but they had also traced a path for others to follow, a path out of silence, out of shame, out of misunderstanding, a path her parents now walked beside her, no longer denying the journey, but sharing it. If you're struggling with mental health stigma, remember, understanding heals what silence conceals. Share your story. It might just be the lifeline someone else has been searching for.